Welcome to Unstoppable Faith with Dr. Kazumba Charles. This program is designed to inspire you to stand on the Word of God and to help you build unshakable and unstoppable faith in Jesus Christ. Here's your host, Dr. Kazumba.
Thank you so very much for joining me once again on this program, and we are thankful for those who pray and support this program around the world. Today I have a very special guest. I have had on this program Mary Marantz. Before I bring my guest on, she's written a book, powerful book, and you're gonna hear some of the things she has put in this book. Slow growth equals strong roots. And I love the subtitle, Finding Grace, Freedom, and Purpose in an Overachieving World. That is so powerful. Mary, welcome on Unstoppable Faith.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me back. I've been looking so forward to this. I loved our first conversation, so I'm just really thankful to be here.
Let me begin with this here, because in this book, you say that it is for women who is always, or a woman who is always performing, and you definitely know a thing or two concerning that. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I like to tell people I've been doing the field research for this book for 40 years. My
Wow.
first book, Dirt, is about growing up in a trailer in rural West Virginia and then going on to Yale Law School. And I think a lot of us can resonate with this idea. If we didn't grow up with a lot, this switch can kind of get flipped in us where we feel like we start running, and the problem is we don't know how to stop, right? A lot of people look at a story like that and they go, well, the only side effect that you had to deal with was success, right? It taught you to go out and fight hard for what you want. And that's not the case, right? Like, what I want people to know with this book is, and I talk about it in Dirt as well, I wanted people to truly understand how for a lot of us, achieving can become like our oxygen. We don't know how to breathe without it. And it becomes this very primal, visceral, almost like survival instinct where we feel like if we stop, we won't be safe. So I do definitely know a thing or two about feeling like you have to keep performing, you have to keep striving, you have to keep achieving, you have to keep accomplishing and acquiring, or you might cease to matter altogether.
Let me go to this question, because in our last actually interview that we did, we looked at date. You talked about the moment you found out you got into your law school after growing up in a trailer in West Virginia there, and you say, what if success was where the real trouble began? I paused last time from that because we see it the other way around, and you say, what if success begins where success was where the real trouble began? Now, how did that moment and that line in particular inspire you to write this book?
Yeah, so that's one of my favorite. I love that you call that out, actually. That's one of my favorite parts of Dirt. It's talking about there's a reason we flip the channel when the underdog finally gets everything they ever wanted. Cue the credits, roll the credits, cue the score. We don't want to hang around with Rudy once he, gets in the football game. Take your football and go home, Rudy. We don't want to hang out with people once they get everything they ever wanted. And that's sort of a funny tongue-in-cheek entry into this idea of, when I say, what if success is where the real trouble began? What I mean is, what if we get everything we ever wanted and it still doesn't feel like enough? We still don't feel like enough, right? We feel like there's always this mirage just beyond our fingertips. If I can just get there, if I can just arrive at that point, then I'll be happy. I'll be happy when blank happens. And we can spend our whole life chasing that moving target, because the person we are on the day when that goal comes true is rarely the same person we were when we set it. And by the time that goal gets marked off our list, we have added 10 more check boxes, this checklist of other people's success that we think that we have to go do now. This is what we're supposed to go do now. And so I say, what if that's where the real trouble began? Because what I'm really saying is, what if you got everything you ever wanted and all it showed you was that you're still not satisfied. There's still this hole in your heart that needs to be dealt with. For those of us of faith, we know that when we try to feel satisfied by anything in this world, it's always going to come up short, because we were created to be satisfied by God alone. And so that's really kind of the heartbeat of it, is getting people to arrive at this place. I say, at last, exhausted is our inciting incident, because you have to start to feel that I have tried, I have chased, I have gone after the next big thing. And it's starting to dawn on me that maybe I'll always feel this way when I'm trying to find my happiness, my purpose, my satisfaction in things or accomplishments.
And your title of the book is Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots. Can you just talk to that person right now who are in the, in the birthing process, or they are, in the producing process? They haven't yet started seeing the fruits and they feel frustrated, disappointed. What can you say to that?
Well, first of all, I will say that I am right there with you. There's a reason that one of the entries in this book is when slow growth is the worst, right? If we're going to get honest about embracing slow growth, we have to also be honest about those days when it feels like you have a freight train of pent up energy in your chest that wants to burst out into the world. Those days when it feels like you have the worst sinus infection in the world. Somebody's doing a handstand on your face, and then you get on a plane. You add cabin pressure to all of this potential in you that's just not getting out into the world fast enough. And I always, I talk about in the book, I think I would be the worst farmer, because I want to plant the things and then immediately go back out an hour later and look for the growth. And that's just not how things work. That's not the rhythm of the planet that God has given us. And it's not the rhythm of our growth as well. There's a line in the book where I say, Justin and my husband and I were having a conversation, and I had kind of this light bulb moment. And I said, we cannot go and rip open the seeds once they're in the ground in the hopes of speeding up the process. We cannot go in through our own force and our own control and try to cut corners to, shorten that timeline. It kind of reminds me of a story of a man wanted to help the caterpillar who was struggling to get out of the cocoon to become a butterfly. And in doing that, because that man had the butterfly skip that step, it didn't go through all of that struggle and that pushing against these things that were binding it, which means that all of the fluid didn't make it into the wings. And so it never fully developed its wings. It was never fully able to fly because somebody tried to help it skip the struggle. So that's what I would say to you in the first place is, I get it. Sometimes it's the worst. Sometimes it feels like it's happening for every other person. You feel like you've been forgotten. You feel like your story doesn't matter. You feel like other people have been tapped with this Midas touch. Everything they touch turns to gold. I always joke with Justin, man, why didn't we pick overnight success is super easy and everything we touch turns to gold as our mantra, instead of slow growth equals strong roots, which was something he told me. And I will tell you that there's also an analogy in the book where I talk about weeds and flowers and trees. And I say it can be very tempting in this world to say, I want to grow just like a weed, because frankly, the world rewards that. The world rewards those of us who pop up out of nowhere overnight, grow to dizzying heights, multiply with dizzying speed. And everything is about this fleeting currency of more, how much, how many, how fast. And it's all about what's happening on the surface. And you're so tempted to trade your story, your timeline for theirs, until you remember that a weed can be pulled right out of the ground on a half inch of roots. That's all that's holding it up, because they only grew for what people could see, not for what they stand for. So I would remind all of us who are getting impatient that what we are growing for has a longer timeline, because what we're building was built to last.
Now, Mary, I want to go to this year. Let me get back to the book here, because the first line in your book, it says, I am not sure where all the fireflies have gone. Tell us about that line and what that line means to you.
Yes, this is why I love coming on this show. You ask the best questions and find the best parts. So, yes, there's a reason we kick off the book that way. And it's twofold. Number one, it's talking about a quote that I heard once from a photographer friend of mine named Will Jacks in a talk where he said, be willing to walk amongst the fireflies. And when he said that, I took it to understand that he meant slow down and notice again and be willing to see, that idea of we either have the choice to see everything as a miracle or nothing. And then the second meaning is when I was little, growing up in West Virginia, where the world could say there were a lot of things lacking, we were not lacking in these little miracles all around us, right? We would sit out at night in the summertime, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, telling ghost stories as the, twilight kind of gave way to darkness, and you would see a million fireflies. And we just noticed, this is a true story. We just noticed at some point that living in Connecticut, we stopped seeing them in the summer. I don't know what happened to them. I don't know if it's like a bumblebee situation or but we realized we hadn't noticed seeing them in a long time. And during 2020, when we were all trying to figure out social distancing, our friends Aaron and Peter came and sat on our porch. And in the height of one of the hardest times, we were all as a world, a global community going through, just sitting there in this simple moment, this silence of a summer night, grateful to be able to be outside and socially distant with one another. We started to see actual fireflies in the yard again. And I said, I don't know why the light would choose to return in a time of such darkness, but maybe it's because we were all slowed down enough to begin this act of noticing again. And so we begin this good work right there.
Another part in your book, you talk about, you say inciting incident is this: breathless and at last exhausted.
Yeah.
Why is the at last important, and what Sharpie mark in the through the calendar does that represent?
Yes. So a very interesting story, or just thing to note, is that there is this passage at the end of Dirt, my first book, where when I wrote it, I thought it was wrapping up in a bow the journey. I thought I was done. I thought I was done with the work I'd been called to do in telling that story. And it's talking about sort of in a visual, metaphorical way, becoming a tree. It says at a certain point, breathless and at last exhausted, you double over at the pain of a lifetime spent proving. You've run so hard for so long, you've gone so far out into the world, only to find yourself back at the beginning. And this one truth is always clawing, always scratching at your heels, like the painful chains you never asked to bear. No matter how hard you run, you can't outrun you. And I thought that was the ending of a story about making peace with your past. And as soon as we launched that book into the world, I realized that was only halfway there. If you think about a hero's journey, there's this moment called the point of no return, where you've gone too far to go back, but you are not where you set out to go either. The true hero's journey winds up back where you started, but you're a changed person. And so that passage becomes the first passage to kick off this second book. And I say that it is our inciting incident. It is this plot point or narrative moment that sends our protagonist into a journey that will leave her forever and utterly changed at the end. And that is, we begin at a place of surrender. We begin at a place doubled over and at last exhausted. We begin at this place where we have spent decades trying to run from our story, trying to spiral ourselves up in this, busy as a badge of honor, flurry of activity. If we don't stop, it can't catch us. We have tried so hard to accumulate and acquire a beautiful life, only to end up more exhausted than we've ever been. I say in that Fireflies section, if that tangled hair, skin knees, young girl version of us could sit on the couch beside us and look us in these mirror reflection eyes that are her own, this exhausted version of her, she would ask the question we've been asking ourselves for far too long, and that is, what happened to you? And so we begin at this place where we go, maybe this isn't ever going to satisfy. So now maybe I can find something that will.
Wow. Mary, expectation is a big thing for all of us. People's expectation, we have a higher expectation, and people have higher expectation of us. What did a pensive track full of books teach you about other people's expectation?
Oh man, yes. So quick backstory, just to put that in perspective. When I was growing up, my grandma Goldie, who's a huge character in Dirt, in every sense of the word, she's an important character, and also she's this larger than life character. And she was one of 13 kids, and one of her sisters, Charlotte Ann, or my great aunt Annie, she never had a daughter of her own. She had 2 boys, and she just, for whatever reason, kind of took me under her wing, took a special interest in me, and my whole life growing up, she said that she was putting together a hope chest for me for when I got married. And she would, go to the tag sales in her neighborhood in Ohio. And she would, she called it like going through the rich folks neighborhood looking for nice things that she could put aside for me for when I got married. And so when I was in law school, we actually got a call that my very active, very fiery great aunt Annie had taken a slip and fall, and she had first gone into a nursing care facility, and then she passed away very suddenly. And I ended up getting a phone call from an insurance lady saying that there was an inheritance for me, and that also there was a storage unit in Ohio that my husband Justin and I should go. My fiance at the time, Justin, and I should go collect, that we should go claim. And so we got in our car and drove all the way from Connecticut to Ohio to see everything Annie had hoped for me. And when we got there and they opened the storage unit, it was front to back, top to bottom, just full of things that she had hoped for my life, right? That she had wanted me to have more than she did. And she saw that in the form of things. And so we ended up having to rent the largest truck Penske offers, which is the 26-footer, just to get it home to Connecticut. And it was this random mishmash of everything from a Tiffany bowl she found at a nice tag sale to like little melty plastic angel Christmas ornaments. And so we spent all summer kind of going through that, what to keep and what to let go of. And every one of us, when I was writing a book about giving up overachieving for your worth, I imagined it like a bicycle wheel where there's this center, hub and all of these spokes that pour into it, all the different reasons that cause us to believe we are only as good as what we can achieve. And one of those things, if we're being honest, is the expectation of those who came before: parents, grandparents, siblings, spouses, whatever the case may be. There are people who have opinions about what it looks like for our life to be successful, for our life and our story to have mattered. And we cannot go through life carrying that heavy, crushing weight. We cannot go to our grave buried in these crystal-plated versions of someone else's dreams, things that they hoped for their life, that they pass on to you. It's beautiful. It's sacrificial when somebody sacrifices so that you can have more, but it is not a debt that we have to owe. We have to come before God shedding all of these things and say, what does it look like for me to use my gifts and my story in service to others for your ultimate glory for the rest of my life? That's it. And all of these other things, people will just have to find a way to be okay with. They do not get to say where we go to school, what job we have, what it looks like for us to live in our purpose. That is a conversation between us and God.
There is another line, Mary, that you touch on. You say, soon your antidote to scarcity became an experiment in, excess. Tell us about that.
Yes. So I bet there are a lot of people watching right now who had the experience where maybe you didn't grow up with a lot. Maybe it felt like there was always something missing or you were not enough of something. And that can, in the first level, give us a scarcity mindset where we think we will always be lacking, right? This idea of this is the way it is, this is the way it was, this is the way it always will be. We can take on those limiting beliefs. And in an effort to break free of scarcity, some of us, my hands are raised up over here, will go through a process of trying to stuff what feels like that root canal the size of a chest wound, this raw nerve ending, this hole in our heart. We can try to stuff that open wound full of so much stuff that the air can't get to it because the air makes it hurt. The air reminds us that there's still a wound there. So we try to backfill our lives with things and gold stars and accomplishments. There's a line right after what you read that says, I tried to stuff my life so full of stacks of sweaters, there could never be enough versions of me to ever wear. And so for me, part of that has been building having the beautiful home, having more throw pillows than any grown human ever needs, right? Mm-hmm. And some of us who turned into spenders after not growing up with a lot because we felt like the good life equaled a good pair of jeans. Mm-hmm. So yes, the kind of going through this process of I don't want to feel empty, so let me stuff my life so full.
You talk about two different characters of women here that you introduce throughout the book. The different yet somehow the same versions of the woman who is always performing. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, well, when I first started writing this book, in my head, and in the manuscript, it's actually in the book, I said that this was for the most put together woman in the room. And what I meant by that was this is the woman who is so relentlessly hard on herself, who feels so not enough that she overcompensates for that by walking into the room without a hair out of place, the new outfits, the accomplishments introducing her, because she's terrified that if she doesn't hit this A++ standard, that's her bare minimum to be acceptable in most rooms and to be invited to most tables. So she stumbles into everybody else in the room seeing her that way, even though she would never describe herself or think of herself that way at all. And as we started to market the book and release it and have conversations around it, what I realized is that, ironically, this book is for the woman who is so relentlessly hard on herself that she would never self-identify as being the most put together. She would never self-identify as an overachiever. She might say, I am an achiever, but I don't even know if I've done enough to be an overachiever. And so describing what it's like for that woman to twist herself up into knots to be acceptable for other people, I started to notice that the language I was using to describe all of these different versions I had gone through, these different yet somehow all the same versions of the woman always performing, as I came to call her, because people couldn't wrap their heads around being the most put together, but all of us can resonate with always performing. What ended up happening is that we ended up with 5 characters. We have a masquerader who's always hiding in plain sight. We have a contortionist who twists herself up into tiny knots because to contort is easier than to be criticized. A performer always on her toes, a tightrope walker living for the next upswing of a high, and the illusionist in the distance who's always waiting for some perfect version of her before in the distance that she can never catch up to before she can even start. And so we actually have put together a quiz that people can take to find out which of these 5 characters they are. You can find it at achieverquiz.com or marymarantz.com/quiz, and it will tell you which type you are, where you get stuck, what motivates you to go after your goals, and how you move forward with purpose. So that's kind of the backstory there.
What was that moment that went like, this is my aha moment as you wrote the book?
Yes. So I was mentioning the illusionist in the distance, the one who feels like she can't even begin to do the thing that she feels called to until life is perfect, until she is perfect. And I described that scene as, you're constantly chasing these 1,000 different splintered versions of you. They kind of diverge in the distance, all these different paths you could take to perfection. And they stand on these illuminated mountaintops, hair billowing in the breeze, but never landing, their robes, so, swelling all around them. And you're clawing up the rocky cliff, trying to catch up to them. Your once wide open palms, unscarred palms, are now broken and bleeding from this chase, this constant striving. And this pretend version of you in the future turns around, looks you in your eyes that are, again, mirror reflections of your own, smiles a sweet, superior smile, and then goes on without you. And I say it's one thing to be left by someone else in this life. And maybe we have experienced that in either real life or nightmare, what it feels like to be left by someone we love. But to be left behind by ourselves, this version of you that is supposed to be you, who's supposed to care about you and want to, walk with you to the next place, leaves you behind. And in that moment, when I was really describing the pain of being left behind, of these versions of me I was chasing, grown up Mary's chasing perfect pretend Mary in the future, the epiphany that hit me so hard was, but never once have I turned around to look and see little Mary in that trailer, who I've been trying so hard to leave behind, who I feel superior to. She wasn't enough of something for grown-up Mary, so I've tried to leave her behind, even as these pretend versions of me are leaving me behind. And I say, God, help me to not lose myself by leaving her behind, by losing her. So making peace with this littlest version of us and seeing us now as this grown woman who's holding her hand as we kind of walk out of the fire. So yes, that hit me hard. That one resulted in a lot of tears when I had that kind of epiphany.
You've got an inspirational story just from growing up in a trailer to where you are today. You know what? I want to stop right here first. I want you to look into that camera, because sometimes people feel like when they are in a bad season, they feel like they can never rise from that season. You shared before, when I had you on this program, you had shared growing up in a trailer, but look what God has done. You've got to Yale University. You've got a law degree, and here you are today inspiring millions of viewers, not only on KITV, around the world. You can be found everywhere. I just want you to take a moment. There is somebody right now, they feel like they can't push through because of where they are at, and yet you have an experience. Just share one or two thoughts concerning that.
Yeah, what I would say to you is something I feel like God said to me when I was little, and I was standing in the yard outside that trailer and perpetually and forever staring at that trailer and wishing it were something else, wishing that I could have a real house, and thereby, if it could become real, then maybe I could be as well, that I could become a real girl with a real story and a real plan for my life. And what I felt God say to me in that yard was, someday all of this is going to make sense. I am going to use all of it, the hard, the broken, the messy, the muddy, the beautiful. One day I'm going to put words to it, and you'll see that none of this was wasted. And that, your story, don't never wish away these wounds, because one day these wounds are going to help other people heal. So that's the first thing that I would say. But the second thing that I wish I had also been able to whisper to myself in that moment in the yard was also, just keep in mind that your life does not have to be perfect in order for it to matter. Your life does not have to check any set of success by the world's standards in order for this story to be used. And your story is not a mistake, even if you find yourself in your 40s, in your 50s, and you're still trying to find your way through the mud. You're still healing from things that came when you were little, right? Like, we think it's just that we cross that finish line, we get that thing we wanted, and then life is that happily ever after movie, that cue the score, roll the credits. And so what I want you to hear is, it does not have to be perfect to matter. In fact, some of our greatest points of impact, my coach Kim always says this to me, some of our greatest points of impact will come from our deepest places of empathy.
Mary, first, before we go, I understand you have a quiz people can take to find out which overachiever they are. You shared briefly just before I go, because I want that also to be part of what the people take away from this interview. Where can the people go to take that quiz and look at themselves and see where they are?
That's right. Yes. So that URL for that is Achiever Quiz, ACHIEVER quiz.com. Or if you forget that for some reason, you can always do marymarantz.com/quiz. Either one will get you there. And it takes literally about a minute or 2 minutes to take. And it's, what we've heard from people over and over is it is surprisingly accurate and surprisingly insightful. Like, people are like, I felt like seen. Like, they're going through these questions that are kind of like, which one of the Wizard of Oz characters would you be? But when they get the results, and the results page lays out, here's the heartbeat of what drives you. Here's why you are motivated. Here's where you get stuck. Here's where you get tripped up. Here's where you play small. And here's how we move forward. We've heard from so many people that they cry when they get their results in a good way. So yeah, check it out, achieverquiz.com.
And you can see it on the screen there. Now, where can the people also go to connect with you?
Yeah, so a really great place, if you go to marymarantz.com/quiz to take the quiz, then you'll be right there in kind of like the Mary hub, the Mary universe. So marymarantz.com will take you from there. You can link to any of the books. You can link to the podcast, which is the Mary Marantz Show, our blog, which we put up once a week, which has all the latest episodes. And then it's at Mary Marantz on Instagram and any of the socials. And if you watch this and it spoke to you, I'd love to come send me a DM and let's talk about it.
And I encourage you to join us again every Wednesdays as I bring to you Kingdom Insight, where we teach the Word of God in context. Join me as we share that Word. Until then, God bless you. Shalom, shalom.
Faith is the currency of the kingdom of God. Thank you for tuning in to Unstoppable Faith with Dr. Kazumba Charles. If this program has been a blessing to you, write to us at life@kazumbacharles.com and share your testimony.